Okay, Barry, look. I know last time I tried this, it didn't turn out too well, but in honor of the great Buggy Senpai's birthday, we will add to you his nose. Just don't go mad with power this time and we're all good, alright? Ah! Get the blast shields ready! Are we good? Okay, alright, we're good. Alright, so, hey everybody, how you doing? Tekking101 here, and it is August 8th, at least where I'm at right now. It might be, time zones are a thing, but it's August 8th right here, which means it is the great Buggy Senpai, Buggy Senpai, Buggy Senpai, not Ace because Ace died and Buggy cannot die because he is Buggy. Buggy D Clown's birthday. That is correct. So today we're going to be having a video all about Buggy and Shanks, maybe if there's time. Okay. Specifically today we'll be talking about the younger years of Buggy D Clown. What was the thing that really made Buggy who he is today? His formative years, you look at every famous person in history, it usually had some impetus, some beginning in the younger years, I hear when Buggy was only 3 years old. You hear all this crazy stuff about Odin, right? Odin, what? He crushed a grizzly bear with a giant boulder at the age of 4? Pfft, please. Buggy did that in utero, and by age 3, he was already bench pressing mountains and throwing them at giant kaiju bears. Please, Odin, you got nothing on Buggy. But no, so we're going to be talking about Buggy and Shanks and how they were apprentice pirates aboard Roger's crew, the Oro Jackson, okay? But something to keep in mind here, and this was something that was brought up quite a bit during the flashback that we had with Odin, which also had to include Roger and Whitebeard as well, because Odin's story, overlaps with Roger and Whitebeard's. Although I am glad that Oda, he managed to, I think Oda realized when he was doing that flashback, he's like, oh crap, okay, I'm gonna have to show Roger and Whitebeard. I mean, I guess Oda could have skipped over those parts, or he could have kept it really ambiguous, but Oda's like, no, I mean, Odin knew Whitebeard and he knew Roger. I've already established that, so I already have to include that in the story. So we had really cool scenes with Roger and Whitebeard clashing, and, the reveal of the name Laugh-Tale, which we kind of already found out the way it was written in the One Piece movie Stampedo. But, we had to see that stuff right there in the flashback, okay? But once again, keep in mind, it is brought up many times during that flashback, that is Roger's final journey. That is his final year of life, traveling the Grand Line with his crew one final time to get to Laugh-Tale, to get this epic treasure of the One Piece, to find the end of the road poneglyphs, okay? And it's brought up by, Neptune and other people, like Whitebeard, Roger has had a slew of adventures for decades before this. This was after God Valley. This was, long after, keep in mind, they arrived at the end of the Grand Line relatively quickly in their journey. They arrived at Lodestar, which is the last island on, the log pose that you could reach. As the Straw Hats are right now, Luffy and the rest are probably going to reach Lodestar or that point within the next few months of the story. Okay, so if you remove that 2-year time skip that they had to take off where they didn't travel at all and they just stood still, they could have probably reached from the beginning of the Grand Line to Lodestar less than a year, if not maybe a year, a little bit more than that maybe, but it's not going to be much more than that for at least the Straw Hats. Now, the ocean was a little bit more rough and tumble back in the day when Roger first attempted this, right? So it probably took him maybe a few years to get from the beginning of the Grand Line all the way to Lodestar Island, but that was his adventure that he did years ago. When Neptune met Roger in Odin's flashback, Neptune hardly recognizes him, because remember, at the very beginning of the journey, Roger didn't even have his famous mustache yet. Alright, so all that stuff's going on. So Roger was journeying the seas for a few decades before Buggy and Shanks were even born. So right now in the story, if Roger was still alive, he would be 77 years old. Currently, Buggy and Shanks are the same age, 39 years old. So that means that when Buggy and Shanks were born, Roger was already 38 years old. And I'm imagining, I mean, you can guess whenever Roger really began his journey. Luffy was 17 when he started, so maybe Roger was the same age. He might have been in his early 20s, whatever. That's still a good, probably close to 2 decades of traveling before Shanks and Buggy were even born, okay? And we still do not know, and we're going to have a discussion right now about that, how did Shanks and Buggy join Roger's crew exactly? How did that go down? So that's the first thing I want to discuss here with these two characters, okay? I would like to say that Buggy and Shanks joined at the same time. You know, like they were like childhood friends on the island, or like childhood rivals or whatever, right? It's like Red and Blue from Pokemon, or Sasuke and Naruto. And then Roger showed up and he's like, "Hey kids, stop fighting, get on me pirate ship." And they're like, "Okay," and they jumped on. But that's not the case. At least if that would have happened, you'd have to jump through a lot of hoops, because Shanks has been revealed to be from the West Blue. That's where he was born. He mentions this to Whitebeard when he gives him the sake. You know, "This is a special sake from my hometown in the West Blue. Give it a shot, Whitebeard." And Whitebeard's like, "I guess, whatever. Guess it tastes alright for West Blue sake," right? And Buggy, that we know of from the Vivre card anyway, I don't think this was ever expressly stated in the manga, but in the Vivre card, which is the data book essentially, it was revealed Buggy was born in the Grand Line. That's right, Buggy the Clown, D-Clown, born in the Grand Line. And this was back when the Grand Line really meant something, okay? This was back when Paradise was like the New World, and the New World was like Dark Souls, you know, the game setting the highest. I've never played Dark Souls, but like, you know, like merciless, you're definitely going to die version of Dark Souls, okay? And Buggy was born in the middle of all that chaos, right? So he was born in the Grand Line. So, I mean, you could maybe spin it that maybe Shanks might have ended up, you know, he was born in the West, but he somehow ended up in the Grand Line when he was a little kid. Maybe something similar to like Frankie. Frankie ended up, he was born in the South Blue originally, but his parents were pirates, and they went into the Grand Line, and they just kind of like tossed him off the ship at Water 7 in the middle of the Grand Line, and then that's how Frankie ended up there and meeting Tom and Iceberg and Kokoro and everybody like that. So maybe you could have something like that where Shanks, like maybe his parents were pirates, but they weren't like great pirates or anything like that. They were the kind of like murdering, pillaging kind of pirates that didn't really care about him. Or it might have been a situation similar to Kobe, where, you know, Shanks was forced into servitude for pirates, and they took him from the West Blue to the Grand Line when he was very, very young, because we know Shanks and Buggy were working on Roger's crew when they were at least 9 years old. That was the earliest so far that we've seen them. That was when, during Odin's flashback, where they were looking at the paper, and they're like, you know, "Captain Roger, you know, Whitebeard apparently has a samurai from Wano on his crew now. They're getting all the credit for all this stuff. We're doing stuff too." And they were a little bit jealous of Whitebeard getting all the press. And Roger's just like, "Don't worry about it, you know, but hey, a samurai from Wano. I'd like to meet this Odin fellow someday," right? So that's the earliest. And even right there, it kind of established at that point that Shanks and Buggy had been on the crew for at least a little while before this. At that point, Roger had already passed off his straw hat to Shanks. Now, it's possible that as soon as Shanks would have joined the crew, Roger would have seen something in him, and he would have been like, as soon as, like, you know, because, well, then again, you know, Shanks knew Luffy for a while before he passed off the hat. It wasn't like an immediate thing. Shanks stayed at Fuchsia Village for a few months before finally, after the event with the Sea King and everything, and Higama, that finally Shanks felt it necessary, like, I will give you my hat. So maybe they joined Roger's crew at age 7, age 8, something like that, and they were on the crew for a little while, and Roger saw something. Well, he saw something in Buggy, definitely. He knew Buggy was destined for greatness, so he knew that, "Buggy, one day you're gonna be god of this world. You don't need my hat. Shanks, you're gonna need all the help you can get, but I think you can manage." And so he gives Shanks the hat. Buggy, maybe Roger gave Buggy his nose. Ever think of that? We've never seen Buggy as a baby, okay? We've never seen him as a toddler. So maybe we just assume he was born with the nose, but maybe Roger gave him the nose. And, you know, he gave Shanks the straw hat, gave Buggy the nose. And that was like the rite of passage, so to speak, you know? So I'm going to assume they were on the crew at minimum 8 years old. They were on the crew for at least a year at that point, you know, traveling with Roger. And by the way, don't you just love Roger? He's like, "Yeah, I have a few 9-year-old kids on my crew. We're traveling the most dangerous ocean. They probably could die in so many ways. Yarg, whatever. We be pirates, matey." I love that. But anyway, so, yeah, it's possible Shanks could have ended up in the Grand Line, or, other option, Roger could have just picked them up individually. Roger could have, you know, he started in the East Blue. That's where Roger began his adventure at Logtown. But, you know, he could have ended up well, actually, see, that's the tricky thing. In order to make this work, oh, wow, okay, so in order to make this work, Roger starting from the East Blue, the only way to get from the West Blue from the East Blue would be, I mean, as a pirate, you know, without access to, like the gondolas at Marijua or anything, you would have to go into the Grand Line, and then go to the New World and then travel south through the Calm Belt. That's the only way you could gain access to the West Blue. Now, I'm not doubting Roger could do that. I'm just saying, like, yeah, that would take a while, right? And so maybe after his first adventure in the Grand Line, like Roger did the Grand Line thing first. He went from the Twin Capes and then Fishman Island, and then he found Lodestar, and he's like, all right, well, we finished the Grand Line journey. Let's see what the rest of the blues have to offer. And so then he went to the North Blue, and then the West Blue, and then maybe, you know, later on one of his journeys, that's where he met Shanks in the West. And then traveling around the Grand Line another time, he ran into Buggy. In fact, it's entirely feasible that that adventure that we see him there, you know, when they're in the flashback and they have the clash with Whitebeard, Roger does the, you know, godless slash or whatever against Whitebeard. It was probably on that run where they met, like they started the Grand Line journey, they met Crocus at the Twin Capes, they maybe ran into Buggy at that point. They ran into Buggy in the first half of the Grand Line. I wonder what island Buggy was born on. Yeah, that's weird. I mean, it's probably an island we've never seen before. It's probably not like Whiskey Peak or, yes, Buggy was raised in, well, no, even better. Buggy was raised in the jungles of Little Garden. You know, Buggy lived his days eating Tyrannosaurus Rex. It's like Jiro from Toriko, where he was raised by a battle wolf. You know, Buggy was raised by a freaking Gigantosaurus, you know, or those things, what were those things called? Megalodons. Or he was raised by a giant shark, a prehistoric shark, or whatever, and he was raised by the, Dorian Broggy would have been there, and they raised him up, you know, and they just never talked about him to Usopp because they were too afraid, you know. But Buggy was probably from just some random island in the first half of the Grand Line in Paradise that we've just never met yet, one of the ones there. Although I would still be interested. I'm interested in Shanks's hometown. I'm interested in Buggy's hometown, you know. And given the fact this is One Piece we're talking about here, they probably didn't have very happy upbringings. If joining a pirate crew at the tender age of like 8 or 9 is like the better alternative, then and knowing One Piece, they were probably orphans. Probably forced into labor or in some horrible context, like not a fun situation. You know, all we know about Shanks' hometown is apparently they make really good sake there, and Shanks didn't really go into detail about what his home life was like, or Buggy talked about what it was like growing up, but yeah, they ended up aboard the Pirate King's ship, okay? And that seems to be like where they first met. I don't think they knew each other beforehand. If we're just going with the logic that, you know, Buggy was in the Grand Line, Shanks probably joined first, and then they went maybe from the west right into the Grand Line for their final journey. And that's when they ran into Buggy, and then Buggy and Shanks got acquainted with each other, and they started working together on the crew. I love how, like, during the battle, when they were on that random island, and it was Whitebeard versus Roger, you kind of had, like, all right, so, like, the real men, we fight, you know, like, Roger faces off against Whitebeard, probably, like, Rayleigh goes up against Vista, you know, all the adults versus each other. But then you have, like, the apprentice pirates, you have, like, the freaking pirate kids club over to the side. You got Shanks and Buggy on Roger's side, and you got Marco, Jozu, and Marshall D. Teach, or, you know, who would become Blackbeard. And so it's like, all right, you know, Roger's like, all right, kids, you guys just fight over there, all right? We're not gonna put, you know, adults up against kids. That's just, yeah, that's not gonna be fair, you know? It's like, yeah, hey, Rayleigh, go fight against that Jozu kid. You know, that'll really be a fair fight. So the kids are kind of off, you know, doing their own thing, and they fight, and after the battle is over, that's when you have, like, Shanks and Buggy there talking about Marshall D. Teach, and he's like, hey, that kid over there doesn't sleep, and Shanks is like, oh, what, really? That's weird. Yeah, and then, you know, he teaches, like, oh, he's talking to Marco about Shanks and Buggy, and he's like, hey, what's with those kids over there? And he's like, oh, yeah, they've been on the crew for a little while. So, yeah, at this point, they were a little older, because the point when they were 9... then there was a little bit of a time skip, I think, to like 3 years later. So they probably were like 11 or 12 when they actually fought on that island. And then by the time it ends, you know, when they finally get to the Laugh Tale, Shanks and Buggy did not go. But they probably would have been around 13, maybe 14 years old at that point in the story. And then Roger, you know, disbanded the crew. They all went their separate ways. Buggy and Shanks were present during Logtown, during the execution of Roger. And Shanks asked Buggy to join his crew, and then Buggy's like, screw you, I'm not joining your crew, the captain's dead. He's like, all right, Buggy, well, I'll always be here for you, man. Screw you, Shanks! All right, Buggy, but if you ever need help, come and find me, I'll help you. All right. You know, it probably went something like that, honestly, and that might be a favor that Buggy might very well need to cash in, because Shanks has really no problems with Buggy whatsoever. Like, really, they ran into each other at Marineford, and Shanks was just like, oh, hey, old friend, how are you doing? Meanwhile, Buggy is just like, how dare you say that? How are you doing, buddy? To me, Shanks, after what you did. And he's like, Shanks is like, what did I do? And he's like, don't you remember that time that I was holding a devil fruit and a pirate map, and you snuck up on me, and it was you sneaking up on me that caused me to devour an entire pineapple in one bite? Because of my weird reflex to immediately bite down whenever someone startles me. You know how, like, in old horror movies, and this is something I just love, I was actually watching an old episode of The Twilight Zone the other night where this happens. The old horror movie cliche where someone's, like, walking through a house and there's someone else behind them, and in order to get their attention, they don't just say, hey, here I am. They reach out with their hand really creepily, like, do-do-do-do-do-do-do. You know, like, so Shanks does that to Buggy, but instead of just doing the normal thing of just, like, jumping or like, oh, you scared me, what? Why didn't you just say you were there or something? Like, hey, Buggy, I'm walking over towards you now. Instead of that, Buggy's immediate reflex is just like, oh! Shove an entire pineapple into your mouth and then swallow the whole damn thing whole. Okay, Oda. I mean, that's one way to get a devil fruit power, anyway. I wonder if Buggy had to deal, because it's always stated that devil fruits taste really bad. But that's when you're, like, you know, chomping into it, like you're getting the juice into your mouth or you're slicing it up. I wonder if the bad taste carries over if you're just like, you just swallowed it the way Buggy did, right? It's like, whoa. That was his special skill this whole time. It just turned out, right? And so on top of that, he also dropped the treasure map into the sea. And he blames Shanks for that. I'm sorry, Buggy. I'm just like, did Shanks know about that condition, maybe? Maybe Buggy, when, you know, they met each other and be like, hi, I'm Shanks, red hair. You know, I have red hair. I'm not red hair Shanks yet, but I am red haired and I am named Shanks. And Buggy's like, oh, hi, nice to meet you. I'm Buggy. I have this thing where if you sneak up on me and scare me, I devour food, just entire plates and, you know, entire groups of fruit whole. So just make sure not to creep up on me and we'll be good. And Shanks like, okay. You know, like, if he told him beforehand, I can understand why this might be Shanks' fault, why Buggy would be mad at him, but I don't know, Buggy, this is kind of all on you, man. Besides, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, because, I mean, that treasure map, you know, who knows, maybe Oda might circle back, and we might find out that that treasure map that Buggy dropped was actually super, super valuable. Not like One Piece level, but, like, that was the treasure map of the fabled Wang Zhi this whole time. And I can understand Buggy being upset if it was, like, a really valuable treasure map. But if it was just, like, a regular, like, Captain Turquoise Beard's treasure over on the island over there, it's a whole 1 million berries. I'm like, wow, yay, right? But yeah, Oda could always do that. Oda could always loop back around and say, like, oh no, yeah, this was something really, really important. And that treasure map is obviously gone. It's in the water. It's destroyed, right? But there might be another treasure. Like, who knows? Like, maybe Buggy at some point, maybe it would have been, maybe it's possible it was Captain John's treasure. Who knows? Maybe Buggy was interested in Captain John's treasure all the way back then. Maybe he heard one of, one like Rayleigh or Roger or Scop or Gabon or somebody talk about the Rocks crew on board the ship, and they mentioned, like, oh yeah, the Rocks crew, man, that was a good battle. That was a crazy strong crew. They had Wang Zhi, and they had Shiki. I wonder what he's up to. And oh yeah, they also had freaking Silver Axe and Captain John. Hey, by the way, yeah, did you know Captain John had a treasure this whole time? Weird, you know, and then maybe Buggy heard about the lore of Captain John's treasure at that young age, and then he discovered the map. And he's like, holy crap, this is it right here. This is Captain John's treasure. And he lost it. But maybe there was like another copy of the map somewhere, and then you have to do the arm piece. I mean, I'm trying to connect the dots here to make that map more important than it really is. Because mangaka, here's the thing. You might be saying I'm grasping at straws with that. Mangakas like to do that type of shit. They like to do that, where it's like, they introduce something early on in the story that we think we all forgot about, and then skip to 900 chapters later, and it's like, oh yeah, that thing way back then in like chapter 7 turned out to be a really relevant thing. Look at Rayleigh! Rayleigh's design shows up in like chapter 19 of One Piece, and he doesn't actually properly appear until like chapter 500, right? So mangakas definitely love to do that, especially when the series begins winding down, when we start getting into the last arcs of stories. That's when they start, I think, looking back maybe nostalgically, is that a term? It is now. They're looking at the books of the past, and they're like, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna incorporate that random treasure map that Buggy had in like chapter 19 of this story. I'm gonna incorporate that into chapter 1032. You know, like it's like really important, right? But yeah, that's where the rivalry sort of started. I mean, the rivalry, the hatred that Buggy had for Shanks, it started right there. But even before then, they were kind of like friendly rivals. They were like the only two apprentice pirates on Roger's ship. There were no other kids on the crew except for them. You know, because Roger didn't do the whole family thing that Whitebeard did. So there was Marco, Jozu, Teach, all on Whitebeard's crew, like younger kids. But when it came to Roger, it was just Shanks and Buggy. So I can imagine, especially being around, so can you imagine being an apprentice with such a great man like Roger looming over you? Like, he would be your hero. He would be like, I want to be just like that guy. I want to grow a mustache just as epic as his, right? And, you know, every day, whenever you get into fights with the Marines or other pirate crews, it's like, you got to prove your mettle. You got to show Captain Roger and Silver's Rayleigh and Scopper Gabon. You got to show them that you can bring it, that you're strong, and you're going to be a great pirate someday. And it's probably with that ambition that, you know, Roger gave the hat to Shanks and all that too. But imagine being Buggy in that situation. Let's take away all the hyperbole, all the ridiculousness for a little bit here. Out of everybody on Roger's crew, I think it's pretty safe to say Buggy was the weakest. I know, blasphemy! I know, Tekking, but listen, think about this for a moment, okay? Think about being Buggy in that situation, okay? And he does get a devil fruit, but it's not until a little bit later that he gets the devil fruit. Certainly when Buggy was like 9 years old, he didn't have the devil fruit yet. That wasn't until he was a little bit older. But Buggy, he's got, like, his knives that he uses. That's, like, his main weapon. Shanks uses a sword, and he's training in that. And, you know, they're both together, like, the weakest members of the crew, because everybody else is an adult. So it's like, okay, step one of being a proven, you know, worthy crewmate on Roger's crew is, I gotta beat Shanks. I gotta be better than Shanks. If I can best Shanks, then I can maybe prove myself, you know, further up the line, right? And also keep in mind, when they're traveling around with Roger, they didn't think the journey was going to end as quickly as it did, you know, because Roger has to disband the crew because, you know, I was like, well, I'm sick and I'm not going to make it much longer, so you guys go off and do your own thing, right? I'm assuming Roger, I'm assuming Shanks and Buggy thought they were going to travel on Roger's crew until they were in, like, their late teens, their early 20s. Like, this was just going to be a thing, and they were eventually going to be, you know, adults as well, and they were going to fight alongside the rest of the crew. And then that's how sucky it was when Roger disbanded it because he got sick, right? And it also probably could explain when Shanks cried when Roger explained to him that we don't know exactly what he said because Odin wasn't present during that conversation. He just knows that Shanks went up to him and talked to him about, like, what did you find on Laughtail? And then Roger told him, and then Shanks started to cry. Now, probably he cried because he knew how important Laughtail was to Roger. Like, we're going to find Laughtail and we're going to discover what this ancient treasure One Piece is. And then Roger says, like, oh, well, the One Piece, we can't use it yet. It's not time yet. It's going to take another 10 years or 20 years or whatever to do it. And unfortunately, I'm not going to make it that far. And that's probably why he ended up crying. Although I have to say, Shanks was an ultimate bro there because Buggy ended up getting sick. Buggy ended up actually catching the, if I go to that island, I will die disease. Right now, I understand that there's different translations here. In the official translation, that's not what it is. But it doesn't actually say that in the official, but in context, that's what he caught, right? Like, they're about to go to the final island in the New World, Laughtail, the Mystery Island. No one's ever stepped foot there before, and then right before that, Buggy catches this ridiculously high fever and can't travel. So even if they don't actually call it the can't go to that island or I'll die disease in the official release, Buggy caught the if I go to that island, I will die disease. So that just proves another one of Usopp's lies accurate once again. But Shanks was like, he didn't even think it was a big deal. Shanks was just like, don't worry, Buggy. We'll get to go to Laughtail at some point anyway. I'll stay with you. Don't worry about it. We're friends, right? We're bros. And that's how it went, and that's pretty damn cool. And Shanks was so confident. He was like, yeah, someday we're gonna be adults, and then we're gonna find that island, and we're gonna have our own adventure together. You know, that's actually even more sad when you think about it. Like, think of it like Shanks's perspective when he was like 12 years old. He was probably thinking, like, when we grow up, Buggy, we'll join our crew. You can join my crew, or I could join your crew. We could have our own crew. Maybe we could be co-captains or something, and we could travel the world together. That could have been maybe one of Shanks's, like, ideals back then, and then it didn't go that way. You know, Roger got sick, and then Buggy, he skipped out. He said, no, I'm not joining your crew, and he left. And so that might have actually shattered one of Shanks' dreams. Do you understand in a parallel universe, Buggy could have actually been maybe the vice captain of the red hair crew? Think about that. That actually... Oh, I sense a new what if. I'm always looking for new what if scenarios for One Piece. And, I've already tackled a lot of major ones. Like, what if Ace survived Marineford? What if the time skip never happened? What if Aokiji was the new fleet admiral instead of Akainu? A lot of good ones. But what if Buggy accepted Shanks' offer and he was the first official member of the red hair crew, and it was like Buggy and Shanks... captain, vice captain, or maybe both co-captains. Who knows how it would have went? Buggy, as we know, he has blue hair, but his true hair color is actually blonde, as we see in Stampede. So Buggy's not really against dyeing his hair. He's a damn clown. And he doesn't even actually need to dye his hair, because it's like the red hair crew. So we got red hair Shanks and red nose Buggy. There we go. Keep an eye out for that. Gonna do the chapter review tomorrow, of course, but keep an eye out for that. That might actually happen in the near future. I gotta workshop that a touch, but yeah, I think I'm just gonna leave it here on a good cliffhanger. But yeah, thanks for watching, everybody. Celebrate Buggy's birthday by, I don't know, going to a circus. Oh wait, that's right. You can't really do that in the current situation. Well, you should go and